Why do the chosen ones secretly struggle with lust? You see, the mystery of the chosen is not that they are free from temptation, but that temptation clings to them more fiercely than to others. Why? Because to be chosen is to stand between two worlds, the pull of heaven above and the ache of the body below. The burden of expectation weighs heavily. When others stumble, it is called human nature. But when the chosen falter, it is called scandal. And so they hide, suppress, bury the fire within. Yet what is buried does not die, it burns brighter in secret. Lust is not merely about the body, it is the shadow of a deeper longing. At its core, desire is the cry for union, the echo of a soul that remembers wholeness. The mistake is not in the desire itself, but in thinking it is unholy. In truth, every craving is a distorted reflection of divine hunger. But here lies the paradox: the more one tries to conquer lust by force, the stronger it grows, for resistance feeds the very thing it fears. And so the chosen wrestle in silence, ashamed of being human, forgetting that even in weakness the sacred is not lost. The secret struggle with lust is not a curse but a teacher. It reminds the chosen that holiness is not the absence of desire, but the awareness that all desire can be transfigured. What begins as hunger for flesh can become hunger for spirit, if only one dares to see through the veil. The chosen ones are not ordinary in the eyes of others. They are lifted onto pedestals, wrapped in robes of reverence, and placed beneath the magnifying glass of moral perfection. The community, the family, even the self begins to demand from them a purity untouched by human weakness. Yet this very elevation becomes a cage. For the chosen live not as free beings but as symbols, forever watched, forever weighed, forever expected to embody what the rest of the world dares not attempt. In this relentless pressure to embody holiness, their humanity is quietly suffocated. When a chosen one feels the stirrings of desire, the natural warmth of the body, or the restless fire of longing, it does not arrive as something ordinary. It arrives as guilt, as shame, as betrayal of their sacred image. What another person could laugh off as simple attraction, they must hide like a crime. This act of hiding, of concealing their own humanness, becomes heavier than the desire itself. Lust is not the true prison, the expectation that they should never feel it is the chain that binds their soul, and this burden multiplies in silence. For who can they confess to? If they speak openly, the world accuses them of hypocrisy. If they remain silent, the weight festers within. Their isolation grows because the chosen are rarely allowed to be human in the eyes of others. They are made into statues of virtue, yet statues do not breathe, do not bleed, do not feel. To demand perfection of a living being is to demand that they stop being alive. This silent contradiction gnaws at the heart until the very pressure of being perfect makes the fall into imperfection inevitable. The paradox is cruel. The more exalted one becomes in spiritual stature, the more dangerous the smallest fault appears. The preacher who falters, the mystic who hungers, the leader who desires, these are judged not as men and women, but as fallen angels. And so the chosen live under an invisible weight, carrying not only their own temptations, but the disappointment of all who believed them to be more than human. In this sense, lust is magnified by expectation. The whisper of temptation becomes a roar, precisely because it must never be heard. Yet within this burden lies a hidden teaching. The chosen struggle not because they are unworthy, but because they have been trapped inside an illusion, that to be close to the divine is to be far from human. In truth, the divine is not found in the denial of weakness, but in the honest embrace of it. The burden of spiritual expectation is therefore both a curse and a compass. It crushes the chosen under the impossible weight of purity, but it also points them toward a deeper realization that holiness is not perfection, but authenticity. And perhaps when the chosen finally learn to carry this burden with honesty instead of secrecy, lust itself begins to lose its sting. When the chosen ones are told to cast out their desires, they imagine that suppression is the path to freedom. They push the fire down, deny its heat, pretend it no longer lives in them. But what is forced into darkness does not disappear. Instead, it grows in silence, gathering power in the depths of the unconscious. Like a seed buried in soil, it drinks from the waters of repression and eventually sprouts as something far stronger than what was first denied. This is the shadow of desire, the form it takes when it is hidden away instead of acknowledged. The shadow has a strange hunger. It does not rest until it is seen. And because it is unseen, it twists itself into distorted shapes. Dreams that unsettle, thoughts that intrude, urges that strike at the most inconvenient moments. The chosen then feel tormented, wondering why temptation seems to chase them even harder than others. But the torment is not proof of corruption, it is the natural consequence of living in denial of one's inner fire. The shadow does not vanish when ignored, it only grows impatient. Consider the paradox: a man who openly accepts his desire may experience it gently, passing through him like a breeze. Yet the chosen one who declares himself above such desires experiences it as a storm, tearing through his soul at night, leaving him restless and ashamed. The difference lies not in the desire itself but in the relationship to it. By exhaling desire, by treating it as a forbidden intruder, the chosen unknowingly give it more authority, more energy, more power to shape their inner world. The shadow is not evil in itself, it is misunderstood energy. It carries within it the same life force that fuels love, creativity, passion, and longing for the divine. Yet when denied, that force becomes tangled. It seeks expression through hidden paths, through secret fantasies, compulsions, or sudden lapses of control. This is why those who seem outwardly most disciplined may secretly burn with the fiercest temptation. The more rigid the outer control, the more explosive the inner rebellion. And yet, the shadow of desire holds a secret gift. By surfacing in strange and uncomfortable ways, it reminds the chosen that they are not as pure as their masks suggest. It breaks the illusion of perfection. It calls them back to humility, back to the soil of human struggle. In this sense, lust becomes a mirror showing not corruption but the limits of self-deception. The shadow whispers, "You cannot exile me, for I am part of you. To reject me is to reject your own life force." The true danger is not desire itself but ignorance of the shadow. For when unacknowledged, it can drive one into secrecy, hypocrisy, or even destruction. Many spiritual figures throughout history have fallen, not because they were unusually weak, but because they believed themselves too strong to be tempted. Their downfall was not desire, it was blindness to the shadow. The chosen are most vulnerable when they think they are invincible. But when the chosen turn toward the shadow with awareness, the struggle begins to transform. Instead of fearing it, they begin to observe it. Instead of repressing it, they begin to understand it. And slowly they see that desire is not a curse but a raw, untamed energy waiting to be guided. In this way, the shadow of desire becomes less a threat and more a teacher. It shows the chosen that to walk with light is not to deny the shadow, but to embrace it, to learn its lessons, and to allow even the fire of lust to be woven back into the great fabric of life. The chosen ones often believe that their struggle with lust comes from being trapped between two irreconcilable worlds, the sacred and the profane, the holy and the carnal, the spirit and the flesh. This belief creates an inner war. They imagine that to desire is to fall, that to feel longing is to betray their calling. And yet, this very assumption, that holiness and desire belong to opposite realms, is itself the source of torment. For in truth there has never been a wall between spirit and body, only the illusion of separation. From childhood, many are taught that the body is a battlefield, a place of weakness and sin, while the soul is a higher plane to be protected. But such teachings fracture the self, as if one could slice existence into two neat halves. The chosen then live in constant tension, part of them reaching for heaven, part of them chained to the soil. Yet soil and sky are not enemies. The tree that grows toward heaven draws its strength from the earth. Likewise, the soul that reaches for the divine cannot rise without the energy of the body. Lust itself is not the enemy, it is simply the body's voice, a cry for union, an echo of life's natural rhythm. When seen through the illusion of separation, this voice appears monstrous, corrupt, and unholy. But when the veil lifts, one sees it differently. Desire is not a contradiction to holiness, it is part of the same song. The struggle of the chosen arises not from the presence of lust, but from their refusal to see it as belonging to the sacred whole. Think of water. In the river, it nourishes life. In the flood, it destroys villages. The water itself is not evil or good, it simply flows. Desire is the same. It can nourish intimacy, creativity, and even devotion, or it can drown the soul in obsession. The difference is not in the desire but in the relationship to it. By imagining desire as separate from the sacred, the chosen strip it of its natural harmony and transform it into a force of torment. This illusion of separation is fueled by fear, fear that desire will consume them, fear that longing means failure, fear that the divine will turn its face away if they admit their hunger. But fear blinds the eyes and deafens the spirit. It makes them forget that the same source that breathed holiness into their soul also breathed desire into their veins. If the divine created both, how could they ever be at war? The war exists only in the mind of the one who imagines a division where there is none. The chosen often forget that the divine does not despise the body. The body is not a prison for the soul but its temple, its instrument, its vessel of experience. Every beat of the heart, every rise of breath, every spark of longing is a reminder that they are alive. To deny this life is to deny the very stage upon which the sacred reveals itself. The illusion of separation causes them to treat the temple as an enemy, rather than as a dwelling place where the spirit and flesh are already intertwined. And here lies the great paradox: the harder one tries to divide spirit from flesh, the deeper the entanglement becomes. By calling lust evil, the chosen charge it with forbidden power, turning it into a shadow that haunts them. By rejecting it, they feed it. But when they embrace it as part of the sacred, its grip loosens. The fire no longer burns destructively, it warms, it illuminates, it transforms. The illusion of separation turns a gift into a curse, and the lifting of that illusion turns a curse back into a gift. History is filled with mystics, sages, and seekers who discovered that unity is the highest truth. They spoke of oneness, of dissolving the boundaries between heaven and earth, body and soul. The chosen who struggle today walk the same path, though often unknowingly. Their lust, their temptation, their inner conflict, these are not signs of failure but invitations to awaken. The illusion of separation is the veil they must pierce, the curtain they must draw back, to realize that the sacred was never far away. When the chosen finally see through this illusion, their struggle changes shape. Lust is no longer a shameful secret but a teacher of unity. Every desire becomes a mirror, showing them the dance of body and spirit. They no longer wage war against themselves, but learn to live in harmony with the energies within. And in this harmony they discover that the divine does not demand the rejection of desire, but its transformation. What once seemed like a battlefield becomes a garden, where even the fire of lust blooms into a flower of devotion. At the root of lust lies something deeper than the eye can see. The chosen often mistake their longing for a weakness of flesh, when in truth it is a hunger of the soul, wearing the mask of desire. What they chase in secret glances, forbidden fantasies, and restless dreams is not merely the touch of another body. Beneath it all, what they crave is union, the dissolving of separation, the return to wholeness, the rejoining of what feels divided within. This hunger is ancient. Long before the chosen were given their titles, long before they were set apart by their communities or their callings, they were human beings. And to be human is to feel incomplete, as though something essential is always missing. Desire grows out of this sense of incompleteness. It says, if only I could be joined, if only I could be seen, if only I could merge with another, then perhaps the ache inside me would be healed. And so lust becomes the language through which this timeless hunger speaks. But the chosen rarely recognize the true voice behind the desire. They see only its outer form and judge it as carnal temptation. They imagine it pulls them downward away from the sacred path. Yet in dismissing it, they miss the message it carries. For lust is not calling them toward destruction, it is reminding them of their yearning for connection. The tragedy lies not in the desire itself, but in misinterpreting its direction. They chase shadows when what they seek is substance. Consider the embrace. Two bodies entwined may seem like the end of longing, but the satisfaction rarely lasts. No matter how close, no matter how deep, there remains a subtle ache afterward, a reminder that the union they sought cannot be fulfilled merely in flesh. The body can reflect it, taste it, hint at it, but it cannot contain it. The true hunger goes beyond the physical. It points toward the soul's longing for the infinite, the desire to return to the source from which it once emerged. And yet, the chosen are often caught in this cycle, condemning lust outwardly while secretly wrestling with it inwardly, never realizing that lust is simply a distorted compass. It points in the right direction toward union, but leads them into detours when misunderstood. To scorn it entirely is to miss its guidance. To indulge it blindly is to lose oneself in temporary illusions. The challenge is to see through it, to understand its symbolic voice, and to trace it back to the deeper hunger that lies beneath. This hunger is not shameful. It is the most human and the most divine of instincts. Every song of love, every work of art, every spiritual quest arises from it. The chosen often forget that their spiritual calling itself was born from this same yearning, the desire to be one with God, with truth, with the eternal. Lust is simply the same current of energy but flowing through a lower channel. It is not the enemy of holiness but the raw material from which holiness can be formed. In this sense, lust is a veil. It presents itself as desire for flesh, but behind it lies desire for God. To lift the veil is to recognize that the flame burning in the body is the same flame that illuminates the soul. If the chosen can learn to see beyond appearances, they will find that their struggle is not with lust itself, but with their own blindness to its deeper meaning. What they thought was a snare is, in fact, a signpost. Yet this recognition does not come easily. For the chosen are often weighed down by shame, convinced that their desires make them unworthy. They live in fear that their struggle disqualifies them from their calling. But the truth is the opposite. Their struggle with lust is part of their initiation. It forces them to look beneath the surface, to wrestle with their humanity, to discover that the hunger driving them is not corruption but a spark of the divine. Their very weakness is the doorway to wisdom. The hunger for union, then, must be neither denied nor blindly obeyed. It must be understood, it must be given its proper place. When acknowledged with awareness, lust becomes purified, not by suppression, not by indulgence, but by transformation. The energy that once pulled them towards secret shame can be redirected into devotion, into compassion, into a deeper love that transcends the boundaries of self. The body's cry for union becomes the soul's song of communion. What the chosen long for in another's embrace is in truth the same thing they long for in prayer: to be dissolved, to be held, to be free of separation. They seek in flesh what only the Spirit can provide, and when they realize this, lust loses its power to enslave. It no longer appears as a beast to be feared, but as a messenger pointing toward the eternal. The hunger for union has been there all along, not as a curse but as a compass guiding them home. So the chosen ones do not struggle with lust because they are weak or corrupt. They struggle because they are searching. Their mistake is not in feeling the hunger but in misunderstanding what it truly asks for. At its deepest level, lust is not about flesh. It is about the longing for God, the desire for wholeness, the aching call of the soul to return to its source. To see this is to be free. To embrace this is to find peace. And in that peace, the hunger for union becomes not a torment, but a doorway into the divine. The chosen ones are not saints carved from marble. They are living beings, fragile and radiant, struggling under the same currents that move through every human soul. What makes them different is not their freedom from struggle but the intensity of it. They stand at the threshold between two worlds, the call of spirit pulling them upward and the pull of human weakness anchoring them to the earth. This tension is not a flaw, it is the stage upon which their destiny unfolds. Lust often enters here as the shadow that follows the light. The brighter the flame of calling, the darker the shadow it casts. Those who walk closest to the fire of the divine are the ones who most keenly feel the tug of desire. The chosen wrestle not because they are distant from God, but because they stand too near. The same heat that illuminates their path also stirs the embers of longing within them. In this dance, shadow is not the enemy. The shadow is simply the part of the self that has not yet been understood, the energy that has not yet been integrated. The chosen imagine that they must erase the shadow to walk in the light. But this very attempt at erasure only deepens the division within them. For shadow does not vanish when denied. It grows, it expands, it waits for the moment when the mask slips and truth bursts forth. What they fail to see is that shadow and light are partners in the same dance. One defines the other. Without shadow there is no depth to light. Without light, shadow has no form. The chosen are not called to destroy their shadow but to learn its rhythm, to see how even darkness is shaped by light, and how even desire contains a hidden spark of divinity. The struggle is not about banishment, it is about balance. This balance, however, is not static. It is a dance because it is always moving, shifting, changing. At times the chosen may feel pure clarity lifted by visions of the eternal. At other times they may feel dragged into temptation, restless with cravings they cannot control. Both movements are part of the same choreography. To stumble does not mean the dance has ended. It simply means the rhythm is still being learned. The chosen often fall into despair when shadow rises within them. They believe they have failed, that their struggle disqualifies them from the sacred path. But despair is itself another illusion, for the dance of light and shadow has always been the teacher's stage. Through temptation, they learn humility. Through weakness, they learn compassion. Through failure, they learn surrender. If the path were free of struggle, there would be nothing to teach, nothing to transform. The dance also reveals a deeper truth. The divine is not found in light alone, but in the unity of opposites. Night and day, sun and moon, birth and death, body and soul, all are woven together in the great fabric of being. Lust, then, is not the intruder, but part of the weave. It is a strand of shadow that gives texture to the tapestry. Without it, the chosen would live in an abstract purity, untouched by struggle, untouched by life itself. Seen in this way, the secret struggle is no longer shameful. It is simply the process of learning to dance with both sides of existence. The chosen are not angels nor demons. They are the meeting place of both. Their greatness lies not in being flawless, but in being willing to wrestle, to fall, to rise again, and to discover meaning in every movement of light and shadow. And here is the paradox that few dare to embrace. The shadow itself is what makes the chosen radiant. Without the sting of temptation, their light would be shallow, untested, without depth. It is because they know weakness that their strength carries authenticity. It is because they have wrestled with desire that their surrender to the divine carries weight. The shadow sharpens the light, just as darkness sharpens the stars. But this dance cannot be forced. Those who try to eliminate shadow find themselves consumed by it. Those who indulge it without restraint become enslaved. The wisdom lies in learning the steps to acknowledge the shadow without fear, to let it teach without mastering the soul, to let it exist as part of the greater whole. In this way, the chosen discover that the light is never threatened by the shadow. It is only deepened by it. Lust, then, is not a curse that disqualifies the chosen. It is a mirror showing them where they still believe themselves divided. Every desire is an invitation to integration. Every fall is an invitation to rise in greater awareness. The shadow shows them the places where light has not yet reached, the corners of the self still waiting to be healed. Without these mirrors, the chosen would never know the full scope of their own humanity. The dance of light and shadow also prepares them for others. For how can one guide the broken if one has never been broken? How can one comfort the tempted if one has never felt temptation? The chosen's struggle is not wasted. It is the very thing that equips them with compassion, the ability to see beyond appearances, to love others not in spite of their shadows but because of them. Their struggle becomes their ministry. Their weakness becomes their strength. And when the chosen finally accept this dance, peace begins to emerge. Not the peace of perfection, but the peace of wholeness. They no longer live in terror of their desires, nor in denial of them. They live in awareness, in humility, in harmony with the truth that both shadow and light belong to them. And in that acceptance, lust no longer chains them. It becomes part of the rhythm of life, a rhythm they can move with rather than against. Thus, the chosen ones secretly struggle with lust not because they are less holy, but because they are walking the razor's edge where human and divine meet. Their secret is not shameful. It is sacred. It is the mark of their journey, the sign that they are alive in the full tension of existence. And when they learn to embrace the dance of light and shadow, they discover that even in their struggle, they are never far from the divine. In fact, it is there, in the very tension of the dance, that the divine reveals itself most clearly.